Hello, everyone. Welcome to my teaching learning session. We continue with Unit 3 of BPCC 131, Learning of Block 1 this time. Learning is to understand is a relatively permanent change. Learning happens to children, to adults, to every spheres of ages of people throughout their lifespan. So while learning is so important, an entire unit devoted to it is, the learning is a key factor in behavioral changes. So, what does learning gets to us in our life? Learning gets a relatively permanent change in an organism that is backed by an experience. So, there would be a behavioral change which will be backed by an experience of an organism. Also, to be quoted, this was given by Barron in 2001. So this is a very renowned definition, also to be noted in 2001, given by Barron. And learning are of very different kinds. So learning is not just of one kind, but it's of various kinds that we talk about as motor learning, verbal learning, concept learning, discrimination learning. Let's understand what is motor learning. Motor means muscles. Muscles where it shows movement can be learning, could be driving, can be climbing, running, skating, and even running, jumping around, tying shoelaces. These are all motor learning. Anything that is to do with your actions, to be doing something which is kinesthetic in nature, is muscle movement. Talks about motor learning. Then we have verbal learning, a learning which has equipped us with words, with the concept of skills to communicate with other people with the use of language. It uses sounds, pictures, and something which is words, etc. Concept learning is to classify on the basis of its characteristics and features. So, concept learning is one of those learning that makes categories of males and females, categories of areas, categories of the scenic beauty. It could be categories of places. So, anything in that helps us enable to classify stimuli on the basis of its characteristics and features. Discrimination learning is a kind of learning that gives us the ability to discriminate between similar stimuli, differentiating stimuli, and give our responses accordingly. There are knowing that learning is such an important aspect of life. Learning happens with the help of some theories. So, speaking of those theories, one of the most renowned theories was given by Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov was a physiologist who later became a psychologist with the help of an experiment which was called as classical conditioning. He gave us one of the most important experiment in learning, which was called the classical conditioning. Which is also stated as SSR learning. Then we have a second kind of conditioning, which is called as operant conditioning. This is the second kind of conditioning under learning. This was given by B.F. Skinner, and this talks about SR consequence, which is a stimulus, a response, and a consequence. And there was a very famous Skinner box, which was given by B.F. Skinner. So let's first understand what's the difference between learning and conditioning. Is there a difference between the two? Yes, there is indeed. Learning is an umbrella term under which conditioning also falls into. But to be noted that conditioning on the other end, conditioning that we speak of, is something that is bound by sequences, by mechanism. It does not happen automatically. There's a forced, not rather use the word force, but use the word given. It has been given a stimuli and a sequence of SR, SSR. So there's going to be a mechanical learning. Whereas on concept of learnings can be of any kind. We've spoken of discrimination, motor, verbal, concept, etc. This is one of those kind of learning, which is conditioning, that talks about us to be stating to have a sequence. Also to understand how is behavior understood in a sequence. Behavior is understood as stimulus, response, and behavior. So remember, any response that we give out on the basis of any kind of stimulus which is around us is a behavior. It could be an overt behavior, it could be a covert behavior. Remember, learning will focus on what kind of behaviors? Observable behavior, which is called the overt behavior, and covert are behaviors which are covered, not seen, not being able to visualize. Let's just dwell into these theories and understand that what was the entire concept of Pavlov and classical conditioning. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov gave us this conditioning, which was also called as respondent conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning, name given on and after Ivan Pavlov. This is the kind of conditioning where two stimuluses are paired, which gives rise to a response. So here one stimulus leads to another stimuli, which automatically gives a response. So let's understand what are the two stimuluses that we are going to deal with. First is the unconditioned stimulus, which is called as the UCS. Let's just understand these terms very religiously and put it in the back of our mind for future. Because learning is one of the most important theories which gives base to all the learning principles to CBT, which is the theory of cognitive and behavioral therapy. So learning principles are the base point, are the build up, and the pillar for CBT, behavior therapies, all kind of therapies in concerning behavior. So let's understand some of the stimuli that we are going to talk about in classical conditioning. It's a SSR conditioning. One of the stimulus is called unconditioned stimulus. A stimulus that automatically gives out a response naturally without being conditioned. So this is one of those stimulus that gives out a response without being conditioned. Then we talk about a conditioned stimuli. This is a kind of stimuli which is initially neutral, but we condition it to something that and it does not have the capacity to give out a response automatically. Like the UCS, the unconditioned stimuli, has the capacity to give out response naturally. But the CS does not. It has to be conditioned. It is neutral in the beginning. That's why we pair it with a UCS, and it is able to predict that a UCS will be leading to a CS. CS is a conditioned stimuli. So we know that a coming of the unconditioned stimuli dictate us that a conditioned stimuli will be coming that further gives a response. So, and then there is something called, when we talk about responses, there are two kind of responses. Remember, until the responses are not conditioned, until the responses are not taken care of, they are called the unconditioned stimuli, unconditioned response, because they are not trained, they are not learnt at the moment. So they are called the unconditioned response. As soon as we condition the response, as soon as we associate an experience with it, we pair it up with something, it would be conditioned in nature. It's called the conditioned response. So let's understand, what do we understand in the theory of classical conditioning? It's called the respondent and Pavlovian conditioning. It's called the SSR. There are two stimuluses. One is called the unconditioned stimuli. The other is called the conditioned stimuli. There are two kind of responses also. As till the time there is no learning, it's called the unconditional response. And when the response is learned, it's called the conditioned response. Now let's move ahead and dwell into this type of conditioning and understand what was the experiment of Ivan Pavlov, which is Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. What was it all about? Speaking of this, there was an animal, which was dog, which was involved in this experiment. So Ivan Pavlov had a pet, which was a dog. And he saw that every time that the food was being served to the dog felt very ecstatic. There was a huge amount of energy in the dog. The dog was so excited, and because of that excitation, there used to be salivation that happened with the dog, that we all see with our pets. Don't you see, whenever you make a juggle noise of the food box, or you just juggle the food box a little, pick it up, your dog starts salivating, thinking it's the food time. It might not be the food time, but at times, the dog is mistaken by you touching the food that it is the food time. So he was very keen on how is the dog salivating, and does the food actually leading him to salivate that much. So what he did was, he actually made an enclosure for the dog. So he made an enclosure for the dog, and he placed the dog in that area, and attached a tube at the thyroid area, the area of the, where the salivation is accumulated, and that was associated to a bowl where all the saliva was being collected. So let's understand, the food becomes the unconditioned stimuli. Why? Food will always give a response. Don't we have mouth watering conditions when we see delicious food, or when we see food and it's kept in front of us? Can we resist it? Do we start feeling hungry? Imagine you're done with all your meal, your dessert is done, but there's a huge chocolate that is kept in front of you. Don't you feel salivating? Don't you feel that that water coming in the mouth? That's called the UCR, the unconditioned response, and the chocolate at that point of time is the unconditioned stimuli. So was the food for the dog an unconditioned stimuli, and its salivation was unconditioned response. Then what did they do? They associated a neutral stimuli, which would be converted into a conditioned stimuli. So they connected a bell, and he rang the bell. He realized when there was a ring of bell, the dog did not do anything. The dog was calm. The dog did not know what is the bell all about. So this is called the neutral stimuli. A stimuli that evokes no response. Now, what did Ivan Pavlov did? Ivan Pavlov rang the bell and gave the food. So you associate one stimuli to another. So the neutral stimuli gets associated with the unconditioned stimuli, and then the dog starts salivating. So there's a bell, there's a food, and the dog starts salivating. Why? Because the food is the unconditioned stimuli, which is giving the unconditioned response of salivation. This continued for 15 odd 8 days, and it was tested. The dog was accustomed for all the meals that was given to the dog in a day, that there was a bell, there's a food, there's a bell, there's a food, and then automatically salivation happened. Now, after a few days of conducting this experiment over the dog, Ivan Pavlov gave a hold. He wanted to test his conditioning, wanted to see that did any conditioning take place? Did the bell actually get converted into a conditioned stimuli? So, how will that be tested? Ivan Pavlov removed the food. That means the bell was rang, the food was not given. But what will happen? The dog feels that every time that the bell is rung, the food comes out. So the bell was rang, the food did not come, but the dog started salivating excessively. Why? Because the dog was conditioned to the bell. So he always felt the bell leads to the food, and that is the SSR, stimulus evoke, leading to another stimulus that evokes a response. And what kind of response this was now? This was a conditioned response. So there's a bell, there is salivation, and then salivation is conditioned, so it's called the conditioned response. This is how an entire conditioning took place. There are some dimensions, some categories of a CR is acquired. How is the conditioned response acquired? By a series of contagious pairing of the CS and the UCS. So we can understand how conditioning can change when we make changes in the CS and the UCS, which is the food and the bell. So let's understand there's something called a simultaneous conditioning where the bell and the food is presented at the same time, and the dog feels the bell actually carries the food with it. So there's a bell and the food, bell food together. So this actually leads to classical conditioning, and we do tend to see the conditioned response, and the conditioning is very strong. It's simultaneous conditioning tends to be as strong as any kind of conditioning. Then there is another kind of conditioning which is called the trace conditioning. This also leads to conditioning, like it also leads to faster conditioning. Like simultaneous conditioning leads to conditioning faster. Why? The bell and the food, the dog learns it faster than the food is coming along with the bell. What is trace? Till the time that the bell is rung and its sound is there, the food will be presented. The CS is presented after a brief delay of the UCS. So we ring a bell, there's a bell that comes, till the time that the echo of the bell is going on, the food is presented. So there might be a delay of 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 35 seconds, till the echo of the bell goes on. That's called the trace conditioning, the traces of the bell, and then the food is given. Then we have backward conditioning. This is a conditioning where hardly any conditioning takes place, where you have the food coming first and then the bell. So the food is presented and then you ring the bell. Remember, this kind of conditioning is rarely happening. We cannot condition a dog by giving a unconditioned stimuli and then leading to the bell. The bell will never be conditioned because the food is already given and the dog starts salivating. So it's a backward conditioning. Conditioning rarely takes place, and one of the most strongest conditioning of the times that we have is called the delayed conditioning. The reason is the CS, which is the bell, the food. The bell is given. Like, let's take an example. We ring a bell, and after minutes, maybe few minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, then the food is presented. So we delay the present of the food, which actually builds up resistance in the dog. That the food will be coming, the bell is just rung, it's just been 2 minutes, I have to wait, and the dog keeps salivating and keeps salivating. This is one of the most strongest conditioning that we have, the delayed conditioning. That means this kind of conditioning is difficult to forget. And the fastest is simultaneous, and then is trace. Backward is rarely a kind of conditioning which is happening. So this was on the placement of the bell and the food, the different types of conditioning that we have. These are some kind of determinants of the classical conditioning that we have. Now let's understand the principles of classical conditioning here. So when we speak about the principles of classical conditioning, there is generalization, discrimination, and extinction. And that we'll talk about one odd experiment which is so famous, we all can Google it and check it. It's a real-time experiment. You'll find it a video, a real-time video over this, which was Little Albert experiment. So let's first start with the principles of classical conditioning. See, during the training phase or acquisition phase, the condition must be reinforced. We all know that. And until it is not done, that how do you reinforce in classical conditioning? How do you keep making the conditioning happen? You keep letting the conditioning takes place one after the other. That means it should not go for 2 days. It should go for 3 days. It should go for 5 days. The bell in the food and the bell in the food should continue for a week and more. So that will help the dog to learn, or anybody who's under conditioning to learn classical conditioning. Let's understand three principles. The first is generalization. What is generalization? After an organism is being conditioned, has been conditioned to respond in a certain way to a particular stimuli after a repeated number of trials, you will always find it that the dog might get confused with the kind of CS that you have. So it shouldn't be surprising and uncommon to expect the organism to respond to similar ways to similar kind of stimuli. Like the bell, which is rung for the dog, and the dog get confused with the doorbell, with the phone bell. So that's that's something where a sense of confusion and inability of an organism to differentiate between the similarly looking stimuli, which is called generalization. We tend to generalize it. Then we talk about discrimination. Discrimination is an ability where the organism learns to discriminate between the similarly looking stimuli to restrict their responses to the original stimuli. So they're able to differentiate that the phone bell, their own bell, and the doorbell is very different. There are different kinds of sensations and the different kind of sound that comes out. That's the ability to discriminate. Then there's another principle that we talk about is spontaneous recovery. And extinction. Let's talk about extinction first. Extinction is when the classical conditioning happens, but there is no food. So does not produce CS in response to the CR. That means you ring the bell and you do not give the food. You ring the bell and you continuously do not give the food. Let's take an example. It's been 4 days and you've been ringing the bell and not giving the food to the dog. The dog, with the passage of time, will learn that the bell does not give food anymore. So this is called extinction. With the passage of time, when there is an extinction of the UCS, remember, that will lead to the diminishing of the CR, which is the conditioned response. Then we have spontaneous recovery. So once we've understood that there tends to be an extinction, so when you do not give the food, you do not give the UCS, there is bound to have an ability that the dog will forget that the bell is leading to the food. So what will happen? There will be a spontaneous recovery. What is this spontaneous recovery? The CR suddenly reappears. That means after that things have extinct, and the dog, after a matter of 10 to 15 days later, a bell is rung, there would be a slight amount of salivation the dog ends up showing. So the dog elicits a little bit of CR in response to CS. This is called that little salivation recovery. It's called the spontaneous recovery, which is defined as the CR suddenly reappears after we link the CS and the UCS that is being broken down initially. So these are the four principles that we need to understand. Now let's understand, is there a drawback of classical conditioning? Was there any drawback? Yes, Rosalie Renier, which was a female, she conducted an experiment on a 9-month-old baby called Little Albert and told us that classical conditioning can actually develop fears in people. It can actually lead to development of a lot of fear. How does that happen? There was a little experiment done on Little Albert, and the name of the 9-month-old was given the name Albert, and Watson was hypothesized that J.B. Watson hypothesized that children's fearful response to loud noise is an unconditioned response, which is very true. We need to know that loud noise naturally gives out, fear in children. So what is the loud noise, which is automatically giving a response? It's the UCS, and UCR is the fear. So now in a controlled condition, the little Albert was exposed to a fur white rat and was shown, And initially, the little Albert was not getting scared of that furry white rat and was playing with it. But the Watson later started getting frightened with the rat. How did it happen? See, the little Albert initially was shown rats, the little white rat, and little Albert played with that white rat very conveniently, had no problem. Then later, what happened? Whenever the white rat was actually left in the vicinity of little Albert, Watson struck a sound of hammer on the iron rod, made a loud noise which made the little Albert fearful. How? Rat becomes the neutral stimuli. UCS is the noise, UCR is the fear. Now, what happens? The little Albert is shown left in the vicinity, a rod is struck, a loud noise comes out. That loud noise is a UCS, it leads to UCR, which is fear. So, rat, loud noise, fear. Loud noise, and fear. So, as soon as the rat was shown after a conditioning of 4 to 5, 7 days, as soon as the rat shown to the little Albert, Albert started crying. Because Albert felt that with the presence of the rat, there's a loud noise comes out. So as soon as he touches or goes around the rat, there's loud noise. So there was fear instigated with the use of rat, which initially little Albert was not very, something which was not scared of. So classical conditioning can be very instrumental, not only in instigating fear as such, which can make us learn habits. Like the timetables of our school are acting like a classical conditioning. Learning good habits can also be, at times, learning fear and wrong conditioning can also happen with classical conditioning. So that finishes with classical conditioning. Let's come to instrumental conditioning of B.F. Skinner. So this is a kind of behavior. This is the kind of conditioning which is instrumental. So remember, the kind of behavior or action that is instrumental in producing a reward or reinforcement which operates in the environment. Operant conditioning is actually based on the research of Edward L. Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. So here it's a simple mechanism. You have a stimulus, you have a response, and you have a consequences after response. I'll give you a simple example to make you understand this, and then we'll do this. You tell a child that after getting good marks, he or she will be given a candy. So let's take an example. The child is fearful of science exam and he's been told that you do well and better. Let you do better in the science exam and there's going to be a candy given to you. So out of 20, you got to be getting more than 15 because you've been getting 14 and 13. So the child gets 15, given a candy. So remember, the response is not getting elicited because of the stimuli, it's getting elicited because of the response. That elicit means it's coming not because of the stimuli now, it's coming because of the consequence. Because you are going to give the child the candy, the child performs better. So you get 16, you give him or her candy. Probably get a 17, you give him or her a candy. The child learns conditioning, which is instrumental conditioning. The reward is instrumental in getting you the response. So that is SR and reinforcement. There are two kinds of reinforcers that we have, the primary and the secondary. Primary is basic to our need. Food, hunger, all of these things which are pacifying our body is called primary. Reinforcers which are secondary in nature could be praise, could be monetary, could be money, could be achievement. It could be a pat on the back, it could be incentives, any kind. Now, there are two schedules of reinforcement. One is called the continuous reinforcement, the other is called the partial reinforcement. So, when the reward is given after every good performance, it's called continuous. The child gets 16, 17, 18, 20, every continuously getting good marks in science. You keep continuously giving them a candy. Now, partial reinforcement is that you reinforce the child sometimes and sometimes not. So it's partially. Sometimes you got 16, 17, you did not. Probably the third time you do it. Probably the sixth time. Or the seventh and not at the eighth and the ninth, you do it at the 10th time. So partial reinforcement not coming always. It comes sometimes and does not come the other times. The better reinforcement is always partial reinforcement so that the reinforcement is resistance to again what? Extinction that we studied in the classical conditioning also. Now let's understand what is positive reinforcement, what is negative reinforcement, what is positive punishment and negative punishment. We understood how does the response comes in. The conditioned response comes because of the reward, the consequence which is after. So remember, there was an experiment which was done by B.F. Skinner, which was on the mouse. There was a speaker, light, liver, and dispenser, and a hungry rat was left in the cage. Remember, and the rat was told, you press the liver, the food will come out, and as soon as the food will come out, you are satiated. So now the hungry rat, when initially goes inside, does not know where's the liver. So he's moving around. There is this loud noise. There is light beaming in and out, in and out. Now, after a struggle of 15 minutes later, the rat pulls down the liver. As soon as the rat pulls down the liver, what happens? The food comes out and the rat is satiated. Their stomach gets filled. Now, again, after the rat moves out, has been sent inside again at the noon time. And again, the Skinner box remains the same. So it's a familiar environment. Now, rat takes approximately 9 minutes to press the liver. With the continuous same experiment conducting time and again in the same Skinner rat, what happens? The Skinner box. The rat, as soon as gets inside the Skinner box, presses the liver. You realize why does it presses the liver so soon? Because the rat knows there's a reward which will be coming. After what? After pressing the liver. So we have made the rat learn to press the liver to receive the reward. The food is the reward, and the situation stimuli is the rat being hungry. Let's understand what is the positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is mouse is given the food when the liver is pressed. So after the green light happens, the red light is on because you haven't pressed the liver. And as soon as you press the liver, the green light goes on and the green light goes on. It's the positive reinforcement that happens. Now let's come to negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is the loud noise when the loud noise is stopped when you press the lever. So remember, another way of learning this is one is by reward, the other is negative reinforcement. There's a noise which is coming out of the speaker. So as soon as you press the lever, you actually get the food and the light stops. So pressing the lever is just not associated to food, but also stopping of the light. So this is a negative reinforcement. What are negative reinforcement? Where we want to do the response because we want to escape the difficult stimuli or avoid the difficult stimuli. So here the difficult stimuli was the loud noise. The rat presses the lever because he or she just wants to avoid the noise inside the box. So as soon as the lever is pressed, the loud noise stops. The rat learns that if I want to not be irritated, I want to press the lever. So it's escaping the unpleasant, unwanted stimuli. A response is given. So there's no reward. This is called the. So here, what is the equation? It's S and R, and the S is unpleasant, and response is given to avoid that unpleasant response. So now let's come to positive punishment when the mouse is shocked when the lever is pressed after the red light. So the positive punishment is to do what? The mouse is shocked when the lever is pressed after the red light. The likelihood of repeated behavior. Positive punishment would be punishment which increases you to stop doing the activity and all the wrong behavior. So positive punishment would be doing something and the child stop doing. Let's take an example. You tell the child that if you misbehave, you would not be given the playtime. So the child stops misbehaving because he needs the playtime. Negative punishment is not applicable here. Negative punishments are not here. Only positive punishments are applicable. So the mouse is shocked when the lever is pressed after the red light. So the mouse probably the positive punishment would be stop pressing the lever because there's a red light. When mouse is shocked, the lever is pressed. So if you want to avoid the shocking thing, you need to press the lever. So whenever you press the lever, the mouse is shocked. The now mouse will learn to not press the lever. This happens with us. I'll give you a positive punishment example. Whenever we burn ourselves, and then we learn that we don't need to touch the candle will burn you. That's the positive punishment. Learning from mistakes. That's simply being punished. So that finishes with something which is instrumental conditioning. There are some additional learning concepts that comes with learning of classical and instrumental conditioning. What is learned helplessness? This is a beautiful, concept that we should know at today's time, which is given by Martic Seligman in 1960. This was a combination of the classical and instrumental conditioning together. So here also there was a dog which was, in an enclosure, and Martic Seligman was working on classical conditioning with dogs. So when an animal is repeatedly subjected to failure, which is aversive stimuli, that he or she cannot escape. So here Martin Seligman did what? He enclosed a dog in an enclosure and continuously subjected him to shocks and the fact that he or she cannot get out of the stimuli. So it is a state that occurs after a person experiences a repeated stressful situation repeatedly. So let's take an example. You've been failing in your maths exam continuously. What will happen? We feel we really cannot do this. You start escaping the maths exam, or you give the maths exam, and there's a sense of learned helplessness. You become to believe that you do not have the capacity to perform better. You cannot control the circumstances or change the situation, and you have to be like that. So you end up giving examination without any support, and you end up just performing ill and bad all the time. So that is a concept, when you do, you just stop trying because you feel that there are no opportunities that are going to come. So how do animals perform tricks, and how is it possible? There are two principles that happen, which is the shaping and chaining. I'm hoping that learned helplessness is completely done and understood by everyone. I'll just explain it again. Learned helplessness is a concept when you are in a repeatedly aversive condition where an aversive stimuli is subjected to you time and again, and you cannot escape it or leave it or move away from it. So you tend to believe that you have to live with it. So like a stressful condition that you're living with from past 1 year, you feel you just have to live with it. You have no opportunities to leave it. So that's called learned helplessness. This leads to a lot of helplessness, hopelessness, and also we start doubting our capacity and we stop performing. We tend to escape it. We tend to feel that there are no opportunities available and nothing can change. Now, let's have some additional concepts of learning, which talks about how does animals perform tricks in the zoos or any kind of magic shows. They learn it through the process of shaping, chaining, and pre-Mac principle. So let's understand shaping. Shaping is learning a new behavior with which is approximately closer approximation of the desired behavior when reinforced. So that is the organism will be rewarded every small step which is taken towards the targeted behavior. So let's take an example. There's an elephant that we have who's learning to stand. So by 2 feet out of the four. So if the animal just stands this much also, a reward is given. Then this much, a reward is given. Then this much, a reward is given. And when the animal stands in 2 feet of it, then another reward is given. So smallest of change when is reward, it's called shaping, where any approximation towards the behavior is also done and you reward it. Then there is chaining. Chaining is a complex of behavioral skills is in a chain step, which is a process of chaining is breaking down your task into smaller steps and each chain sequence. So let's take an example. You make the, what do you call this? You make the elephant learn. To stand up in 2 feet in 5 steps. So every step is called chaining. So shaping and chaining at times tends to happen together. Children tends to do that. You learn the paragraph by learning every line at once. Poem, I feel children learn through shaping and chaining. Then we have the Premack principle. This was given by David Premack, and it's a principle of reinforcement only. According to the Biscuits, a preferred behavior can be used as a reinforcement for a less preferred behavior. So that's called the grandma rule, that you tend to reinforce the more preferred behavior. So out of whatever that you do in a day, you are given probably a reinforcement or reward for performing well, for doing well. So that's called a preferred reinforcement. That's called the pre-Mac rule. That's what's called the pre-Mac rule. Then we come to another most important process of learning, which was called the social learning theory, given by Albert Bandura. I feel social learning is such an important task to all of us because in today's social society and society that we live, we are all social beings. We learn behavior maximally by observing others. So, according to Albert Bandura in 1977, a social learning was postulated, that is, learning that occurs in a social setting by observing others and others' behavior and its outcome. So, this is called observational learning. There is direct observation and there is an indirect observation. Direct observation that happens directly, and indirect observation tends to be when you tend to make observation indirectly, probably just not in front of the observer and the person that you're observing. There was a very famous experiment that was done in 1961, which was called the Bobodol experiment. This experiment came as it was such a revelation in the psychology field, because social learning came out at a bigger level, telling that we learn values, simple things, we learn maximum social activities through something which is called as observational learning. So let's give you that experiment in quickly so that we understand that what is something which is observation learning. Bobodal experiment, like given at the image above, was given. Children were divided into three groups, and every group had a component part. That means there was children who we see the Bobodals that children are picking up. So there was a child which was a group of children which was A, which was watching these children who went inside the room and played with the Bobo doll. So the group A goes inside the room and starts hitting the Bobo doll aggressively, hitting, pounding, throwing things, hammers onto it. And the children outside are viewing them. And this is group A. So the group A children who are viewing them found that as soon as they go out, these children who are hitting the Bobo doll are rewarded, patted on the back, given a chocolate. That's group A. Now group B. Uh, Group B says that the children who are, watching the children playing with Bobo doll, hitting the Bobo doll, when they go out, they are tend to, they tend to be told that it's a wrong activity, should not be doing. Nothing was given. There was a little punishment which was provided to them, and they move out. Then is Group C. Group C, when enters, these children are simply sitting around with a Bobo doll and again hitting, beating the Bobo doll, and the group C, which is watching from outside, tends to see when these children go out, nothing is done to them. Neither scolded, neither punished, neither given a reward. So now all the companions of A, B, and C that were watching goes inside. Tell me which one will perform maximally. The group A performs maximally, aggressively hits the Bobo doll, and few of the group B stand separately. Why? Because they saw the people who were being punished. Group A saw that they're being rewarded. They start hitting the Bobo doll similarly. So, did you realize that as an outcome of the observing, they saw that these participants were being rewarded? That's why they started doing the same activity. So, one of the most important experiment, which was Bobo doll experiment. Remember, observation learning always happened by attending a stimuli, then retaining it, and then reproducing it, and motivation happens later. So these were some steps in cognitive processes of observation learning. Let's go through them. And which is attention. Attention is attending to the stimuli. Retainment is retaining that stimuli after attention. After you attend it, retend it, you retain it, you tend to reproduce. After reproduction, it depends, are you rewarded or not. If you're rewarded, you tend to get motivated and attend to it again. And if not, it gets diminished. Now let's move to cognitive learning, a kind of learning which is not having any SR connections, no stimulus response. So there are two kinds of learning of cognitive that we have. One is called the latent learning, the other is called the Tolman's latent learning, and Kohler's insight learning. So let's do the insight learning first, which is with chimpanzee. Remember, what did we say? Cognitive learning is the learning of knowing, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, decision making. It does not have a stimulus response connection. It happens, just happens. So, insight learning refers to the sudden realization of a solution of a problem after a period of mental manipulation. So, cognitive learning is mental manipulation, and after you introspect the question and analyze it. So what did Kohler did? Kohler actually did an experiment in a chimpanzee, which was Sultan, who was caged with food just strategically placed outside the cage, but the chimpanzee could not put his hand and take off the food. So, and there were some boxes and sticks placed inside the cage. Now, through a lot of manipulation, Sultan tries to put one box out of the box, get out of the enclosure of the cage, could not do it. Try to use the stick and pull the food, but the food was at an angle that he was pulling it with the stick, it was going further away. So after mental manipulation, suddenly there was a realization of stimuli. What happened? Let's take an example. You have the cage here and the food is kept here. What did the chimpanzee did? Placed one box over the other box, used the stick, stood over the box and pulled the banana like that. So that's happened suddenly. There was a sudden striking of answer which helped him take fruit. This is called as insight learning. Insight is what? Sudden revelation that happens. This was given by Kohler. Again, no SR connection. There is no stimulus response connection. Then we come to another kind of cognitive learning, which is called Tolman's latent learning. Latent learning is called the hidden learning. What is hidden learning? A learning which is hidden in us, but actually comes out when we provide reinforcement. So here there were two groups which were taken. One is the experimental group, and there was one control group one, and was fed upon reaching upon the goal. And the first experimental group, the group two, was not rewarded for the first 6 days of training. But it was found that the food, there were two rats. One was the control and one was the experimental group. So the control group cleared the maze and found cheese at the end. So now, next time when they were put outside the same maze, the rat took lesser time. So control group rats who could quickly able to pick up the cheese. Now the experimental group, for 6 days, these rats were not given cheese and they were taking 10 minutes, 7 minutes to go through the maze. Now after that, what happened? After 6 days of training, but the food, but found food the goal of the 7 day, every day thereafter. So what happened? In the seventh day, the experimental group found cheese at the end. Now, the second experimental group, which was group three, which was not rewarded for the first 2 days, but found the cheese at the end thereafter, was found that he was able in the fourth time, was able to cross the maze conveniently. Why? Because they were given cheese at the end. That happens to all of us. A child is given, gone to a guitar class. You send the child to guitar class, just tell him that this is your recreational activity. I am sending you to the guitar class. You must please take it. It's important for you, helping with your motor skills. The child is, soaked in boredom, does not want to enjoy that class. Now imagine after weeks of that class, you provide that child with something which is a candy or probably favorite milkshake at the end of the class. Now every time the child knows that I'll be got a milkshake if I perform better or enjoy my class, the child starts doing it. So child starts showing learning after reinforcement is shown. So according to Tolman, we all have had that hidden learning, which is called the latent learning, only comes out thereafter when you provide reinforcement at the goal. So this is again something which talks about reinforcement, but again, no stimulus response. It only says that reinforcement heightens your learning, which is it pulls out your learning, which is already present in you. This is called the maze learning. Maze learning also gave us a concept of cognitive maps, which was again given by Edward Tolman. So let's understand. Latent learning is a hidden learning by Edward Tolman. This is change of behavior attributed to latent learning or learning that takes place but does not get expressed in a situation until the situation is conducive in nature, which is required, favorable, fruitful, or rewarded. Insight learning was given by Kohler. He was a Gestalt psychologist, Wolfgang Kohler. Insight learning is a sudden realization, which is the eureka moment, the aha feeling that you have. So this completes with the two kinds of learning that we have. Let's understand the strategies in learning. So there are some strategies which can be improved by use of imagery, rehearsal, and organization, which we completely are aware of, as we know, which is rehearsal talks about the more that you keep rehearsing the event, the stimulus response, the more amount of trials are given, the more that you keep doing it, the more that you rehearse in terms, it could be verbal rehearsals, rehearsal could be maintenance or elaborate. Elaborate is word meaning and maintenance is keep doing it again and again. So the rote learning could be maintenance, elaborate is understanding the meaning and rehearsing, explaining yourself in rehearsing. That's called the rehearsal. That will obviously improve your learning. Then they have imagery. Obviously, mental images impact so much of information. Imagine as soon children starts learning a poem or speaking a poem, starts imagining that sequence. So that's obviously a kind of learning that provides an ability to visualize a situation mentally, and that helps us thoroughly learn it and enjoy it. Then there's organization. Obviously, strategy of organization and reorganization of information makes learning far more better remembered in a way that it facilitates learning. You organize information better, they'll be better remembered. So these are three ways to strategies to impact your learning. Now we move to block 1, unit 4. We start this today with us and we move ahead to with unit, which is called memory. What is memory? Memory is one of the most, I feel, one of the most fascinating thing that we talk about because memory is what after learning happens. What do you do after learning? You memorize it. That's why memory is so important as unit 4. Remember, memory represents the ability to retain information and reproduce it over a passage of time. and when it is required. Like a class test is memorization. It's an outproduct of your memorizations. What happens? You tend to learn, retain, and the ability to retain information and then reproduce it over a time at the right time is called something which is memory. So it's been conceptualized as a process using three stages. So memory happens in three stages: encoding, storage, retrieval. So what is encoding? Encoding is converting your information in a usable form. So you organize it there, you verbally rote learn it, you write it down. A lot of people write it down to learn it better, to understand it better, and then you store it. So anything that becomes usable, you store it. You retain the information in the memory and you store it. Once you store it, what happens? You retrieve that information, you bring that information back to mind when it's required, which is testing. Your stored information, when retained, is called retrieval. So what are the three processes? You encode. After encoding, you store the information and you retrieve the information when it is required. That's how memory happens and takes place in our mind. Now, one of the most important models of memory is the theory of memory model. It's called the information processing model. And one of the most famous model out of that was called the Atkinson and Shiffrin model, which was Richard Atkinson and Richard Shiffrin. So that's why it's called the Atkinson and Shiffrin model. 1986 it was given. One of the most popular model, which says that memory is like our memory, human memory is like a computer. Imagine, when we have quoted memory to be computers, that's the reason that today we have artificial intelligence that is so closer to memory. So when we speak about information processing model, remember why memory is so quotedly similar to computer, with the way it functions within us, with the way in the model it is shown in us. Let's start with a very beautiful example that you can put out to see that how the memory model function and works with us. Let's take an example. You go for vacations, and I'm sure this is the time that everyone is enjoying their vacations, and as some of them are taking vacation because of summers. So you move to a scenic area. In environmental input, what does the environmental input tells us? That the memory is divided in this model into three: sensory, short term, and long term. Information, which is you see a scenic beauty, you see beautiful flowers, colorful, pleasant weather. This is the environmental input. You tend to encode the sound, see the sight, and attend to it. Remember, attention was important. Until you don't attend, you will not retain. So what is happening in the sensory memory? Sensory memory is talking about all the memories which functions because of the five sense organs. All the information impinges. So if you tend to attend to all the information of the sight, of the sound of the birds, beautiful scenic beauty, your eyes and ears take that, attend to it. If you do not attend it, you will forget it. Memory closes, like given in the model. Once you attend to that information, it goes to the short term memory. Short term memory is something which is bigger than the sensory memory, and it has to be rehearsed. So how do you rehearse it? You go back to your room, you tell your friends, you call your friends, I saw beautiful mountains, I saw scenic beauty and flowers of yellow, pink, and beautiful areas that I saw here. There was chirping of birds, this kind of what did you do? You rehearsed time and again. You spoke to two friends and you rehearsed. The information is maintained. Remember, once the short-term memory is rehearsed, it automatically gets uploaded to the long-term memory. Long-term memory is one of the most special memory. Why? It's the memory of the long span, the long time, that you don't forget it. Short term memory is what? If you do not rehearse, if you do not tend to speak it to the other people, whatever that you've seen tend to decay. It will fade away with the passage of time. You'll forget it. But if it goes inside the long term memory, it will stay there for a longer time. You will only forget it if you're overloaded with information or interfered with multiple information. Else it stays there for a longer duration. And the reason that we have started, comparing, and I feel artificial intelligence is such an outproduct because we started comparing memory to computers. What does your mind does? Sees things, attends to it, uploads it in the mind, stores it, and retrieves it when you require. What does the computer did? It attends to information, you type on it, you store in it, and you retrieve it when you require. So is artificial intelligence doing it. Try to scan all data, use it, store it, and retrieve it when it is required for your functioning, for consumerism, for storage, for other, etc. For probably at times manipulation of the minds, manipulation of things. So this is the memory model that we spoke about. This was Richard Atkinson and Richard Schifrin. Told us the multi-store model. Why multi-store? Because there are three kinds of storage: sensory, short-term, and long-term. That we will study in length at the next time to continue with Unit 4 that we started today. So we understood what is learning, the different types of learning. We studied the kinds of conditioning that comes under learning, which is classical and instrumental. Cognitive learning, and one of the most revolutionary kinds of learning by Albert Bandura was observational learning. After that, we finished with the concept of learning. We moved to memory. Memory told us that we need to memorize it. After you attend information, you need to memorize it. So that was memory. We did first model of memory, which was given by Atkinson and Schifrin, also called as multi-store or multi-storage model. That completes with Unit 4 today. Thank you.